evening, everyone. Continuing our committee of the whole meeting here, actually starting the committee of the whole meeting. Today is Monday, September 19th, 2011. This is a committee of the whole meeting regarding ComEd. And to establish a quorum, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Pezza.
Here.
Dudenhoff, absent. Leader.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
York, absent. Hipskin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum, and the purpose of today's committee of the whole meeting is to talk about the issues we've been having with ComEd, also including the legislation, Senate Bill 1652. With us today, we are actually honored and privileged to have several people from our state legislature, 2 of which are former aldermen, Representative Revelletti, Representative Chris Nybo, and we also have a senator here from DuPage County, esteemed Senator Kirk Dillard. So I think what we'll do is open this discussion up amongst the aldermen first, but it's nice that we have actually 3 legislators here actually representing both chambers of the state legislature to possibly answer any questions we may have on the legislation. It's often quick. You know, we're all frustrated with ComEd. We all want to see improvement in reliability and infrastructure. But these guys are the guys that are out in the trenches and reading the bills and understanding what's actually happening. So we were very, very privileged to have them here today. So with that, and actually Alderman Pezza was kind enough to request this meeting, I would like to open it up for discussion and questions regarding some of the concerns that we have for ComEd. And as this goes around, we will actually open this up to the legislators as well if there's any direct questions. The legislators are welcome to talk and respond, et cetera. So guys, please feel free to raise a hand, and the mic will be yours. So we'll definitely recognize you and give you the opportunity to give us some feedback. With that, Alderman Pezza.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, Alderman Mulliner, myself, and Alderman Bram did request this meeting basically because we felt it was important as a whole, as a council, as a city, in hopes tonight to do a few things. To start a discussion and have some questions asked and answered regarding our concerns, not only with ComEd and the lack of accountability and reliability, but also the issues with that Senate bill. I hope we can get a realistic plan laid out by the end of the evening, have a report generated from that discussion in hopes that in 2 weeks from tonight we can convene once again to actually review that report and possibly come up with some type of a resolution as a whole that we can have in hand for not only our state legislators but also for ComEd to know where our concerns are and where we lie as a city and as a council as a whole. That's my intent.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Alderman. And any other discussion as we move on here? Alderman Mulliner.
Yeah, basically, Alderman Pezza did a great job of introducing this concept. Just a couple of things. One is a housekeeping thing. I just want to make sure that we're going to have a point of public comment so that we can make sure that there's other members of the public who may want to speak as it's now required by state law. So I want to make sure we have that as well as being allowing the legislators to speak. I too understand the frustration that all of us are going through. We've been going through it for quite a long period of time now with these power issues. We do have one of your task force, Mayor, is looking into the power issues. We've been talking a lot with ComEd. We've made some tremendous strides with ComEd. Yes, we're still frustrated. We still see power outages. We still see problems with ComEd. But I want to make sure that as we move forward that we're becoming as positive as far as providing them solutions to the issues that we have in front of us, as well as being appropriately critical where it's the right place to be critical. But I want to make sure that when we come forward with a resolution, we come forward with something that addresses the concerns that we have and gives some positive solutions to those problems, and that maybe ComEd can address those for us and move us forward and try to solve some of these problems. We do know that we have the issue in front of us. The one that came up in the last few weeks is the smart grid, and that is, how do we address the smart grid, and where do the legislators stand on it? Why did they all support it? And I really would like to get their take on why they supported it. How that impacts the improving of the infrastructure within the state of Illinois, because that's a very critical component of it. I want to also make sure that we understand where and how ComEd is capable of doing things such as underground. Alderman Healy's talked about that a lot. Is there places in town that we can do underground? Ideally, we'd love to have everything underground, but realistically, that may not be possible. But maybe there's some areas that we can target with that. And then how do we make them accountable? How do we make ComEd accountable for what they're doing, and how do we build that not only into a resolution but also into any franchise agreements that we sign in the future, so that we have some leverage over what their ability is to move forward? I throw out sometimes I throw out crazy ideas, and one of my crazy ideas is if we're going to have chronic areas that are bad, maybe ComEd needs to come in and provide generators to all of those homes so that they don't have to worry about it, and they can just have power come on when they can't provide the power themselves. But ultimately, my goal here tonight was, let's open a discussion. Let's have an open discussion with the people who are here, get some ideas thrown on the table. Let's come up with some thoughts. Let's give it a few weeks to think through. Let's let the public listen to it. Let's let the public come back with some responses. And in a couple of weeks, let's review a report, and then ultimately develop a resolution that's coming from the entire official city council saying, here's what we think the ComEd can do to help us. And also, hopefully we'll have a better understanding of what the legislature is trying to do, and maybe we can give them some suggestions on how they can improve the bill as they come back out of since it has been vetoed at this point, and I know that they'll be bringing it back, and how can we help them to improve that? Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And actually, I'm glad you brought up the public forum, because we actually definitely need to open that up, rather than doing it at the end of the meeting where the legislators can't understand and hear. We'll probably do that in the beginning, so that the two folks that call the meeting were able to give a nice introduction here. At this time, Clerk Spencer, if you'd be kind enough to call the I'm sorry, Alderman Brown, I apologize. Sorry. If you'd be kind enough to call the names for public forum, and we'll do the same thing. It'll be 3 minutes, and we'd definitely like to hear from the public.
Okay, we have our 3 legislators that have signed in for public forum, and we'll start first with Senator Kirk Dillard, Hinsdale, representing Senate District 24.
Senator.
Thank you, and mayors and members. I'm here to listen. I represent the area just south of Elmhurst. I live right on the Hinsdale and Oak Brook border. Obviously, we have had lots of issues with my constituency with Commonwealth Edison. In fact, my own village of Hinsdale had a referendum with respect to whether we wanted to have our own power company that would do what Commonwealth Edison has in the past. So, I live with the frustration, and I see what is taking place in Elmhurst, Lombard, and just areas to the north of me. Status quo is clearly not acceptable. And when you're talking to Representative Nybo, myself, Representative Revoletti, the status quo is not acceptable. And we have to find a solution here. I do not have any problems with Governor Quinn vetoing the smart grid bill. I'm going to meet with Senator Harmon, who's been charged with putting together a new version of smart grid. And I want to learn from you. I'd like a list of what you think needs to be in there, and work with the representatives and take it to Senator Harmon if he's going to be the lead in the legislature. We need to clearly, and it's one of the things that was in the smart grid bill, and you should understand that the smart grid bill that was finally voted by the 3 of us had about 30 to 40 changes. So it went through an amazing amorphous, and it wasn't perfect. And it was the only thing before us. I trusted that Governor Quinn, he told us that he kind of let us know that he was going to veto the bill, and I clearly took him at his word that we would have the summer and we're going to have the fall to ratchet it up. And lo and behold, what happened over the summer was an atypical year, but we should always be forcing the envelope. One of the things that's in that smart grid bill is a movement to buried underground cable. I think that's a good thing. One other suggestion, and I'm going to go back, we have had in the area that I've had the honor of representing real issues with Commonwealth Edison in Darien and Downers Grove. And I want to go and meet with Kathy Weaver, your counterpart mayor, and the former mayor, Brian Krajewski of Downers Grove. It's not perfect in Downers Grove and Darien, but it's much improved. And I want to see some of the things that Commonwealth Edison, Alderman Molnar, did when we put pressure on Edison to respond. Last but not least, in the 21st century, it is outrageous that West suburban citizens have to buy or purchase an $8,000 generator to have electricity for their family. And it is unacceptable. And, I look forward to working with my colleagues in the legislature, but most importantly with you, to see what we can take to Representative Harmon or whoever is going to put together the next version, along with Governor Quinn's staff, of the smart grid bill. So, I have the toughest constituent in the world at home, my wife. And, like Alderman Pezza, when our power goes off, and it goes off a lot, I hear exactly and feel everything that all of the residents who have been without power in Elmhurst experience, and it's unacceptable. And we've got this moment of opportunity here, but I think Representative Rebeletti, Representative Nybo, and myself need to know what you want and what you think the solutions would be in the bill. And obviously, we'll give you access to Senator Harmon, whoever is putting together this bill. So I commend you for doing this, and we'll roll up our sleeves. And the status quo is not acceptable, and we got a lot more work to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Next, Representative Dennis Robeletti, 573 West Gladys, Elmhurst.
Thank you, Mayor, and distinguished members of this chamber. It's a little over 10 years that I had the opportunity to sit where Alderman Polomsky sits and discuss ComEd issues. So this is not a new topic. There's different mayors, some different faces up there, some old faces. But the issue of reliability and lessened outages is crucial. And one of the things that I asked the sponsor of the bill, Representative McCarthy from the south suburbs, was that my constituents here in Elmhurst were tired of power outages. Last year, I sat with my power off from 3 to 4 days. So legislators aren't immune from the blackouts. And I thought to myself, I'd be willing to pay whatever it would be to put back that power, because now you're losing things in your refrigerator. You're unable to do simple things like take a shower, do any normal chores. We talk about the fact of a smart grid being important for business, and as we talk about shopping Elmhurst, it's hard to shop Elmhurst when York Road is black. I asked the sponsor of the bill if it was the intent of the legislation to reduce the amount of outages and to reduce the length of those outages. He answered yes to both. He also told me that this wasn't a silver bullet. We're not going to guarantee that when major storms have come by. Now, we've had 2 100-year floods in the last 3 years. We've had tornadoes jump over this city from down south in DuPage County, land up in Elk Grove Village, trees down everywhere. Power is going to go out. I'm a pretty fiscally conservative person, but I do know that we're going to have to invest in this smart grid at some point. This grid is over 100 years old. Think of all the technology that has come since then. We look at the opportunity to also save money for our constituents because they'll be able to use power at different times of the day during off-peak hours. And so when I supported this legislation, it was not to solve every outage, but it was also to reduce those outages and to hold ComEd accountable. Now, I do understand every bill is imperfect in Springfield, and many times we have what we call a trailer bill. And what that means is that we go back to the grindstone, we sit together, and we ask, how can we bring enough people together to make this a better product? Senator Harmon has been charged by Senate President Cullerton to find out what those answers are from his own members in the Senate chamber. And I ask you to do your due diligence so you can report back to myself, Representative Nybel, and other members from DuPage County, as well as the state, so that when I sit with Senator Harmon, and I intend to, he represents an area just north of here in Bensonville, and I speak to him on a regular basis, of what I would like to see. Because unfortunately, Elmhurst is not the only community that suffers these outages. I have 5 other communities that will tell you the same stories, and they're frustrated as well. What I also suggest to you is that when you have any concerns about any legislation, be it this bill or others, contact me as the process moves forward, because it's always easier to address things on the front end than in a trailer bill. I'm not surprised Governor Quinn vetoed the bill. There's no doubt about that. But there is a move now to override the bill. That means that we need supermajorities in both the House and the Senate to override his veto. So I would hope that whatever your due diligence takes you, that you make a recommendation to us if you'd like us to sustain the governor's veto, or that you have ideas that you would like into the trailer bill. Because I would also submit to you that if this smart grid bill dies, I'm not sure when the next opportunity is to build on something new. That may be the next legislative session, maybe sometime at the end of next May, or I'm not exactly sure. So this has been something that's been in the works for years. It's something that was talked about when I went into the General Assembly back in 2007, and it's something whose idea has been continually talked about. So I know there's numerous questions, and I don't pretend to have all the answers on the smart grid. But what I will be more than glad to do is to answer any of your questions as you're able to submit them. I want to work with you. We serve the same people. We all live here. We want to make sure that we have the power that we need so our families can take care of their business, so that our businesses can thrive and function properly. And that's one of the other reasons the smart grid is needed. Other states already have this technology in place, and when you're already looking and businesses are moving out of this area to go to Indiana or to go to Wisconsin, they're looking at cheaper, more affordable power with less outages. So I commit my efforts and my office to work with you, and look forward to the discussion here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Representative Barboletti.
And last, Representative Chris Nybo, 444 Mitchell, Elmhurst.
Representative Nybo.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to be here with you tonight. First of all, I want to reiterate everything that Senator Dillard and Representative Barboletti said. You know, we are a team for you down there. We're very aware of the issues that we're all facing up here, because as Senator Dillard and Representative Barboletti said, we're living through them ourselves. So, you know, we want to work with you to find out how to solve these problems. We all know there's problems with ComEd. They've gone back for decades, but I think we finally have an opportunity to start working on a solution. Is it the final solution? Is it the solution that's going to end all our problems? No, but it's going to make some significant improvements. So I know I've spoken with many of you about this issue already, because we've been in communication about SB 1652. I've had numerous conversations with officials from ComEd about the bill itself, about your reaction to the bill, your communications to them, their return communications to you. So a lot of what I'm going to mention, you know, we've already covered and we've been working on throughout the summer. I think it's good. I'm delighted that Senator Dillard is here, because I think he illustrates, and same with Representative Barboletti, that the problem that Elmhurst is having is the same type of problem that a lot of communities in the western suburbs are having. Hinsdale, Oak Brook, Lombard, Addison. These are communities that have aging ComEd infrastructure. These are older communities in metropolitan Chicago that have a lot of trees. These are communities that the benefits of 1652, from my perspective, will be most significant. And that's what I would like to talk about. Now, believe it or not, a lot of you have worked for me, so this may take you as a surprise. I actually have a hard personality. Sometimes I'm a difficult person to work with, because you know what? I expect the absolute best. I give my best to everything, and I expect the absolute best. And believe it or not, and I think Representative Barboletti and Senator Dillard would agree with this, I actually developed a particularly difficult reputation on this bill, because I was one of the persons that held out to the very end. I was not convinced that this is something that would actually help our communities. And I wanted to make sure that if I was going to support this bill, I wanted to make sure that ComEd knew how significant the problems in Elmhurst and Oak Brook and Lombard and Villa Park War with reliability. And actually, I made one condition before I supported this bill. I said, I want to sit down with Ann Pramagiore, who will be the CEO of ComEd, and I want to sit down with John Hooker. And I looked them in the eye, and I had a meeting with them, and I said, I'm going to support this bill, but you need to know something, and you need to do something. You need to understand that there are significant reliability problems in my district, and I need you to come to my district at some point and talk to my mayors and my trustees and my constituents, and I need you to talk about what 1652 is going to do. I need you to hear from them the problems that they have, and I want to hear from you what you're going to do to solve those problems. They've committed to that. So whenever our communities are ready, whenever Elmhurst and Lombard and Oak Brook want to get together and have those executives from ComEd come in and listen to the problems that we're having, and when we want to get an explanation as to what they're going to do, that offer is on the table. They've made that commitment to us. Now let's talk about 1652. The facts are very important here, and legislation can be very complicated. But I try to reduce things as much as I can to bottom line numbers, simple numbers that I can understand. And what do I know about 1652? It will improve reliability. Now, it's not a perfect bill, and I'm not going to stand up here and say that it can't be improved. And so I support the efforts by Senator Harman and Governor Quinn to improve upon the bill. There's always room for improvement. But there's two facts that I want to point out, and there's two communications that I'm going to reference. You guys received a letter from John Hooker to the mayor, and you also received a letter from Tom O'Neill, the general counsel from ComEd. Reliability. Reliability is a two-factor issue. It deals with the frequency of outages and the duration of outages. And in response to your issues 2 and 3 in the letter that you sent to ComEd, ComEd specifically talked about how 1652 and Smart Grid, and it's not just Smart Grid. On top of Smart Grid, it's $1.1 billion of additional infrastructure improvements. 1652 will reduce outage frequency by 20% and outage duration by 15%. Now, is that going to solve all the problems? Absolutely not. But you know what? It's going to make a big help. And you know what? The solution to reliability, the lack of reliability, is improved infrastructure. And that's exactly what 1652 is going to do. 20% on the duration, 20% reduction in frequency, 15% reduction in duration. And then you throw in all the additional benefits that 1652 is going to bring, $1.1 billion of infrastructure. And so here's the second fact. And here's why I sat down with ComEd, because I said, look, Elmhurst has a problem. And the mayor knows this because I was on the phone with the mayor while I was talking with ComEd. I was on the phone with Mayor Lalmanani from Oak Brook while I was meeting with ComEd. And I was on the phone with Village President Mueller. All of these communities have the same problem that Elmhurst has. We've all got huge reliability problems. So how is 1652 specifically going to help Elmhurst? Well, they've responded. $10 million of infrastructure improvement, $7 million related to Smart Grid, and an additional almost $3 million that's going to be infrastructure improvements throughout the immediate vicinity or in Elmhurst itself. Now, is it going to solve, the problem of a tree falling on a line and knocking out power? No. We've talked about tree trimming. ComEd can come and work with us on more aggressive tree trimming. The mayor has already been working with ComEd over the last several years to get them to be more aggressive about tree trimming. But it will solve part of the problem. The Smart Grid will help. The additional infrastructure improvements will help. And so what I'd like to ask you is I'll listen to your concerns. I'll always listen to your concerns like I always have and I always will. But I would like to ask you to reconsider your position on the concept of 1652 and Smart Grid technology. I would like to ask for you guys as a council and as a city to support this concept because I truly believe that the biggest part of the solution is infrastructure improvement. And this is a big first step in that direction. So, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Representative Nybo. Very good. Okay. Definitely good to hear from our locals on both sides of the chamber, Senate and House, and 2 former aldermen, and other communities that are affected in a similar way. So with that, I'll open up the discussion to the dais, and anybody like to chime in here? Alderman Wagner, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Representatives Nybo and Rebelletti and Senator Dillard. Thank you very much for coming and speaking. I'm in the 7th Ward of Elmhurst. It's been notorious over the last couple of years. We all have, ComEd's constituents all have the same problem, is that we all buy the power from the same person. That's our first problem. There's no way we can put kind of a capital market position in here to try to help the situation, which certainly it would. Competition is very healthy for markets and infrastructure, but we don't live in that world. That's a perfect world. I would ask the legislation to consider this, that in the corporate world, quote unquote, a company that would invest $2 billion only to get 15 to 20% reliability improvement, where's the common sense in that? That's an awful lot of money for very little return, in my opinion. That, to me, is a problem. That's where our problem begins. If this bill actually costs zero for the taxpayers, there wouldn't be a problem. We'd be getting an extra 15 or 20% at ComEd's expense. They would actually finally have to realize what it's going to take to invest their own money, but it's not. It's going to come off of our backs. That's really the problem that we all have with this bill. Certainly, the infrastructure's old. It needs to be improved. But I think when you guys, the legislators, look at this bill, look at it from a couple different ways, and not just the Springfield, Illinois way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Chairman. Anyone else? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased. I'm pleased with the meeting tonight. I thank Alderman Mulliner, Pezin, Bram for suggesting the meeting. I think this is the next step in a process that started several weeks ago. Part of that process has resulted in a response from ComEd that included, I forget Mr. O'Neill's exact title, but I know he's their corporate counsel and senior VP of regulatory, I think. It included, the response included Anna Primajor, as Representative Nybo mentioned, is their president, soon to be their CEO, and several other senior VPs and actually some VPs at their parent company, Exelon. And that was in a letter, or that letter was in response to our letter that the majority have assigned, and it got us to a level of visibility at ComEd that, quite honestly, we hadn't gotten to before. And now tonight we've got Senator Dillard, Representatives Nybo and Rebeletti. So I'm feeling good that the problems that Elmhurst faces, has faced, continues to face, and will face into the short term are getting a lot of attention, and that's a good thing. A lot of different comments. I guess I didn't know that this was going to be a discussion on the pros and cons of Senate Bill 1652. I think it's pretty well known where I stand. So I don't need to reiterate my points. I wish I would have had the forethought to invite representatives from the governor's office, who clearly was against the bill. I wish I would have thought to invite somebody from the Attorney General's office, who was clearly against the bill, and perhaps representatives from the ICC and the Citizens Utility Board, all of whom were clearly against the bill. But I don't think that's important. I don't think it's important that either we on the dais or others get into a debate on the pros and cons of 1652. The bottom line is Elmhurst reliability. And what are we doing about it? How can our state representatives and senators help us? We may agree to disagree on the merits of 1652, but even if that exists, we can still address the reliability issues that Elmhurst is facing. Representative Rebeletti mentioned that the power grid is 100 years old. The figure that I'd most often heard was between 40 and 50, but I certainly don't doubt that parts of this grid are over 100 years old. Whose fault is that? Is that anybody in this room's fault? Is that anybody's fault in Elmhurst? Or could it be ComEd's fault? And now we've got this Senate bill that throws a lot of money at the problem, and most of that money is dedicated to the smart grid. None of us are opposed to the smart grid. Our letter, in fact, was very clear. We are not opposed to the smart grid. If you were to tell me right now that the smart grid would solve most of Elmhurst's reliability problem, sign me up. In fact, sign me up for double. But ComEd's not going to tell you that. Representative Nybo mentioned some statistics from ComEd's response to our letter. Forgive me if I don't believe them, because in that same letter, and I don't have it in front of me, they made the comment that since 1998, 1996, that power outages were 40% less and duration was 20% less. And I might be dramatically off by those numbers, but that's what I seem to recall, is that they tried to convince us in their response that things are better since 1990-something. Anybody in this room believe that, specific to Elmhurst? I don't. So I guess with all of that said, what's it about? It's about reliability. And what can we do? To answer I guess from my position, the answer to specific questions raised, we as a council will come up with a list of asks. The mayor, city manager, several aldermen have all been in discussions about hiring a professional to tell us what those asks are. Perhaps that should have started earlier. Perhaps that should have started 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. But it's starting now. Then I will feel very confident that we will have that specific list of asks. If you ask me for my opinion, based on conversations I've had with electrical engineers who are, I think I know, but I'm not an electrical engineer and I'm not going to try to play one. So I guess I would ask for a little bit of patience from our state legislators and senators. We're going to get you that list sooner rather than later, and I know the mayor's pushing that very hard so we can be very specific to ComEd in what we're asking for. We are not being unreasonable. We're going to kick and scream because our residents are going to kick and scream at us. Alderman Levin and I and Assistant Manager Kopp was at a 5th Ward Town Hall meeting last week. Roughly 50 residents, roughly 60% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, give or take, was devoted to ComEd. We're all hearing it. Alderman Mulliner has probably heard it the longest because his tenure and because he and Alderman Wagner are probably in the hardest hit areas. It's about reliability. I'm going to wrap up by saying two things. First, Elmhurst reliability is poor. I would suggest it's poorer than those that are around us. And I rely on a Sun-Times study to back that up. According to the Sun-Times, Hinsdale's power, better than ours. Downers Grove power, better than ours. Lombard's power, better than ours. The one town that we can't claim a gripe over, Oak Brook Terrace. So if you want to help them as much as you help us, I'm okay with that because I think their power, at least according to the Sun-Times, is as bad as ours. You know, the mayor has been passionately involved with this. The mayor and I have had several conversations, and I think we would both agree. I think we would all agree that ComEd's performance in northern Illinois has been substandard. I would take a reliability rating equal to the towns around us. And that's pretty crappy, but I'd take it. That's what, unfortunately, that's our midterm goal. Our long-term goal for all of us is improved reliability across the region. I don't want to hear about ComEd's profit margins. I don't want to hear about veiled threats that ComEd's going to make about, well, if we don't get it here, then we're going to move other states, and I don't care. I care about Elmhurst. Finally, in response to something Alderman Mulliner said, I don't think it's crazy to ask ComEd to buy generators for anybody in South Elmhurst that don't have them, because I think that's probably 15 at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Healy. I think everybody in the dais, and I didn't get a chance before our state representation spoke, but I think the three aldermen, who, myself included, who submitted this request to do a committee of the whole meeting, and the rest of the aldermen at the dais all agree. Nobody on the dais, including the mayor, the city treasurer, probably even the attorney, as well as our city clerk and city manager and assistant, nobody is happy with the results that ComEd has provided over the past years, be it 5, be it 10 or however long you've lived here in Elmhurst. This request, from my perspective, was not to discuss in isolation Senate Bill 1652. There has been mention of it because at least I felt that this was a step in the right direction to at least have some resolution, some improvement, be it 15%, be it 20%, or maybe, I don't believe it, but maybe they're being conservative and it would actually be more of an improvement that's being stated in our reliability, being the frequency and as well as the duration of the outages. That being said, I don't know if I have enough knowledge in regards to the problems in Elmhurst to make hardcore decisions on what is needed to be done to ensure reliable service within our city. But I will say that I do have some doubts when they made the presentation to us of the metrics or the data that they presented to the city of Elmhurst and how it seemed to be tailored to show a better picture than what at least the residents feel on a day-to-day basis. So I would make a request to our representation to make sure that whatever comes out of whatever bill, if it's 1652, if it's a trailer bill, what have you, that we have some concrete metrics going along with it, because I think that is very important to actually show the problems that at least Elmhurst residents have seen over the past years. The other thing that I think is essential is guaranteed results. How are we going to measure all this money that is being proposed to be thrown into infrastructure? How are we measuring these guaranteed results? And it needs to be detailed and it needs to be specific. And obviously, myself, or I don't think anybody else in the dais has specifics on what that needs to be. And there has been conversations of hiring a professional so we can have those details. Maybe that's something that we should talk tonight and vet tonight, if that's the right direction to go. Because it has been talked about, hallway conversations, if you will, but maybe that's something that we can solidify tonight, and that will be the outline to go into a total report and resolution on what Elmhurst residents need and Elmhurst residents want from ComEd. My last point being is the requests that have already been made. Burying all the cable in Elmhurst obviously financially does not make any sense from any perspective. No matter how much money ComEd has or how much profits they make, the whole city of Elmhurst is not going to have their cable buried unless, I don't know, ComEd wins every state lotto out there. Because I don't think that it's a financial prudent thing to do or even possible to do within my lifetime. I do think that there should be some areas that are considered, that has been mentioned already, that are hit the hardest, that should be buried in some areas of town. The 7th Ward seems to be hit hard. I'll tell you, the 3rd Ward's not excluded from being hit as well. I think from 1 to 7, everybody is hit to some degree. Over the past few years, I know myself personally, I've been out in stretches up to 4.5 days without power. And I'll tell you, there was made mention of 7th Ward generators. I will tell you, every other household in my ward that I've seen, it's the hum of the generator when we have a big storm in Elmhurst. And good thing we do have good neighborhoods, because you see the extension cords running across the streets to share power for those who don't have it. That's in the year 2011, I don't think any resident in the city of Elmhurst should be forking out money for any portable generators or any whole household generators. And I think that ComEd needs to be held accountable for this. Do they have the funds to do it? I will leave CUB and our state legislature to really hammer on ComEd to determine on what or if their profitability margin should be. And that is one of the issues I did have with the smart grid bill. The other issue I had with the smart grid bill, since I've really never made it public up to today, is from the standpoint of how, I don't know, not a good word to use, but how they were skirting some of the evaluations on the increases that they can institute throughout the tenure of the bill. So overall, I think that my recommendation to the whole city council, I hope we can vet this out tonight, is maybe we should take a bite at the apple in regards to, should we move forward with hiring a professional to evaluate the reliability issues that the Elmhurst residents have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Questions, discussion? Alderman Levin.
Well, one of the things that was addressed in the aldermanic letter to ComEd was responded to with an invitation by ComEd to come and talk to us. And then the Morley authored letter said, come and talk to us. I don't know if anyone on the council has heard anything back, but I really would like them to come and talk to us. It's not an ambush, it's a learning experience so that we can have the same kind of discussion that Representative Nybo had to ask these questions. And I'm just curious in terms of if there's been any response from any of the aldermen who've led that effort or from the mayor, city manager.
Yes, Alderman Levin, the ComEd did in fact respond. We are in the process of setting up a meeting with them, and we will keep the council, abreast as to when that meeting will be. So, the vice president of external affairs called me last week to go ahead and set that up. So we're waiting on them to get back to us with some dates, and we gave them some dates. So hopefully we'll get that set up here within the next. My guess would be the next week or two max.
Well, is that intended to be a council kind of meeting, or is it a smaller group?
When we originally submitted this, we thought a small group would be better. It would probably be myself, City Manager Grabowski, and a couple of aldermen. So we would probably narrow that. Okay? Very good. Any other questions? Alderman Morley.
Thank you. A couple things to point out. Our legislators have the veto session at the end of this month. Very last, if I have my dates right, 3 days at the end of October, and then I think there's a week off, and then 3 days the second week of September. Is that right? November, sorry. So, as it relates to leverage and any additional information we can get to these gentlemen, our timing is very tight. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, certainly as a committee we can take no formal action. We can make recommendations, but I believe that the amount of money or the work that we're asking an electrical engineer to do falls well within the city manager's discretion. So, he can hear our conversation, but because timing is so tight, the last thing I'd want to do, we can still move forward with a resolution of what we want, and I'm all for it. But I don't want to hold up on certain stuff that we can move in parallel with. So because timing is so tight, I think certainly individually the mayor or city manager or anybody, or not city manager, but the mayor or any one of us individual aldermen can contact the city manager and say, let's get this going. It's under your discretion, and see how long it would take to get an electrical engineer to give us the top 10 of what we're looking for.
Very good. I think that's a great point, and given the fact the veto session is right around the corner, I think it's important for us to use the city manager's talent and arsenal of contacts to let this happen. I know the town of Deerfield has just gone through a ComEd issue and a lawsuit, et cetera, so he's looking at that town and actually talking to their folks as well. So I think if we're all on consensus, and I think from the nods that I'm kind of seeing around the dais here, to give him the expeditious ability to make things happen and get a professional point of view as to what our issues are, similar to what we did with, on a much different scale, but similar to what we did with Chris Burke with the stormwater issue, but this would be for electric and much lesser of a dollar amount than probably a pretty quick synopsis quickly, so that we can give our legislators some good advice and strategy, as Alderman Wagner would say. So, but the sooner the better, so that they've got time to position with Senator Harmon what our asks and needs are. So, anybody else? And one of the things I think that we should be aware of, I spoke to Senator Harmon last week. If we're going to try to say Elmhurst needs to get X in this new piece of legislation, I think that's going to be somewhat unrealistic. I think, because all of us are going to be in line, but what we're going to want to see is reliability. We're going to want to see probably more of a consumer-friendly piece of legislation. And I think if I spoke with Alderman Healy earlier regarding maybe if we are one of the lower communities in reliability, maybe their infrastructure addresses those lower numbers first as a priority. We look at towns with, low reliability. We look at towns that have a huge population of senior citizens, a hospital, 3 high schools, a college, and we've got a lot of need here. I think that largest senior population in DuPage County, those seniors need power, you know, especially in the summer when the air is necessary, et cetera, and in the winter, they can't be without. So, so these are all things that maybe we can prioritize in our bullet points to our legislators, so that they understand, and maybe there's a way we can, you know, position ourselves in a fair way, you know, to get some help.
Small point, it is from my understanding, it's a 10-year cycle.
Right. Yep. Representative Nibel, feel free.
It's a 10-year cycle of they're going to do all the infrastructure improvements. So Mayor, your point is very apt. You know, maybe Elmhurst gets a lot of their issues addressed in the first couple of years,
Great.
depending on the timeline that they have.
Sure, sure. Terrific. Alderman Mulliner.
Just a couple of things. One is, if we have a meeting with ComEd, personally, I'd like to see it in a meeting in this format so that all of the aldermen get an opportunity to address their concerns with ComEd. I'm concerned about a smaller meeting. I understand that this is not to be an ambush. The idea is let's talk to them, let's get some education, let's learn about what they're proposing, let's understand what their process is, but also giving all of us an opportunity to ask our questions about this rather than just a small group. And ComEd should be willing to do that. Back a number of years ago, when the last time we had major power outages, the chairman of ComEd, during the last administration when Tom Marcucci was mayor, the chairman of ComEd was here to address some of the concerns that we had, and he stood right in front of the city council and answered our questions, and we should be able to do the same thing. These people shouldn't be scared to meet in the public. They need to meet in the public so that we can be able to ask the questions, not to ambush them. It's not that's not the intent. The other thing is, I really would hope that we can keep this conversation going. I'd like to see us all put together some bullet points that we have, some of our concerns that we have, and meet again in 2 weeks as a committee or as a committee of a whole, so that we can respond not only to ComEd, but to our legislators, so that they're able to, as they look at what direction they're going to go down the road, they have some responses that we could actually address as a city and say, this is where we see the issues. We understand, I agree wholeheartedly that we should bring in an engineer to assist the city on identifying some of these issues, but we all know that we have our own issues that we can address very clearly and that we want to see addressed, and I think we need to get those on paper, and I think we need to, as a council, put those together. So I would hope that we can continue this discussion and that we don't just have this one meeting and say, okay, we're going to wait 6 months to have another meeting. I'd like to have another meeting in 2 weeks and continue this discussion so that we can get to the bottom of this, get something in front of them. We don't have a lot of time to get information back to the legislature.
Thanks, Alderman. Vice Chairman Polomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we're going to be working towards developing some bullet points and identifying what our specific needs are, I'm wondering if the task force would be involved with this. And I have a question for either City Manager, Assistant City Manager Kopp, or Mayor DeCiani. What has been their role so far, and at what point are they going to be sharing information with us?
Well, actually, the subcommittee for ComEd from the task force is actually present in the audience today. I see many of them in the back there, and actually most of those, especially the leaders in that committee, are electrical engineers by trade. I know one is in the power industry, and one is I think either the chair or vice chair is electrical engineer. The gentleman in the white used to be a ComEd employee back in the day. So they definitely are working along with us, kind of in tandem. They will be monitoring and listening, et cetera, so that they can make recommendations as well too. In the end, will be the legislative body making action and pushing the envelope, et cetera. But they're here in the process, and they've got some definitely some good knowledge on the situation as well. So. You know, I think the push to hire an engineer is really our issue. I don't think that should be coming out of a committee, because I think they may feel that they can do this on their own. But I think given the time frame that we're working with, if we make this move, we got to make it pretty quickly, and we pretty much need to seek the city manager's ability and intuition to get this done. So, but thank you. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the representatives and Senator Dillard for coming out tonight. I think we just
need to just remember we're talking about two distinct issues here, and one is a 10-year problem that the smart grid is going to help address, and certainly we want to all get that information to the folks down in Springfield to make the improvements to the trailer bill. But the more important thing that what we live every day is the problems that exist here in Elmhurst and what needs to be improved over the next 12 to 18 months. I'm all for having the city manager to be able to go out and find us a electrical engineering consultant to do that. I think that the folks that are on the task force live the problem and should be part of that effort to put those two things together. And we need to work quickly to get a discussion with ComEd to address those needs based on that report and work on those on an immediate basis. It's all great that Smart Grid may go forward and we need to give that information to our representatives, but these are two distinct problems. These are 10 years down the road that we're going to see these benefits. We have significant problems now. To comment on what Alderman Healy said, we're not against Smart Grid technology. What we're unhappy about is the individuals, the company that's saying, go do this, when they've proven to us they can't deliver on the product that they're selling us today. The Sun-Times has said we are 33rd from the bottom or something like that in reliability in the state of Illinois, which puts us at the bottom 20%. That's unacceptable. I don't care who you are. So again, we need to work on Smart Grid. I think it's ultimately going to be a good thing, and the trailer bill is going to help us. But we have immediate needs here today. We need the electrical engineers, along with people from the community, which is part of the task force, and we need to get those desires in front of that group who can make improvements. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before I go to Alderman Healy, I know City Manager, Acting City Manager Kopp has some updated ComEd. I don't know if you have those with you right now, Mike, or not, but the trip savers, because we have been on ComEd for, Jesus, probably since we took office, and I've blown my stack with them many, many times here at City Hall. But we have been on them, and I believe, Mike, you have a status on what they've done to date with tree trimming. Do you want to go ahead and read through that real quick, just to give us just so we have an understanding of what's been done in maintenance?
Well, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different circuits that they've worked on, and it has to deal with putting in trip savers. The location was Elmcrest, and trip saver is a fuse that's a smart fuse, and it doesn't just one time that it gets a surge, it blows. It'll try to close 3 times because it's just like a tree blowing against a line, and a normal fuse that'll blow that fuse. And this is trip savers. It gives it 3 tries before it blows out automatically. It's the same type of technology used on the substations too. They put those in at Elmcrest and Fremont, Kenilworth and Columbia, Madison and Bryan, Madison and Parkside, Van Buren and Hillside, Madison and Salt Creek, Madison and Sunnyside, Madison and Fairfield, Madison and Hillside. They've also put in mid-circuit reclosures at Madison and Prospect, Madison and Sailor, Madison and Fairview. What those reclosures do is if, let's just say, they did it on Whiskey 668 X-ray, which is Alderman Muller, Alderman Wagner's favorite circuit, and Whiskey 6610 Yankee. And what it does, if one circuit goes down, the mid-circuit reclosure will allow the other circuit to feed that circuit. So they put those in. This has all been completed, and they also did on Whiskey 6610 Yankee and 668 X-ray a cycle trim. They completed that ahead of what the scheduled cycle tree trimming was supposed to been accomplished. They did that ahead of time, and a lot of it to do with Alderman Muller, Alderman Wagner, and Mayor DeCiani. Several meetings with ComEd got them to make these improvements.
Thank you, Michael. Chairman Kennedy?
Yeah, just a quick question for Assistant City Manager. Have we seen or can we get updated metrics from ComEd specific to the improvements that were done on those circuits? Basically, I want to know, did it make a difference?
Sure.
You know, and can we get those, I don't know what kind of time horizon we get those on. Is it monthly, quarterly, whatever? Should be able to see that there was a result. And, you know, while I have the mic, I just want to make sure that when we're talking about the smart grid piece, we need the metrics in there and the performance reliability so that it's transparent to exactly what we're supposed to get from the grid that we're not getting today. So that's a really important piece to that. But if we can get that,
I'm sure we'll get it. The only issue is that since these were done prior to our 2 big storms in the summer, so I'm sure the matrix is.
But I mean, they've got historical information and they've got it, so I think,
sure.
You know.
We will
They
put,
should be able to give it to us.
we'll put that ask through for you, Chairman. Alderman Mulliner, I know you got the,
Yeah, I want to add to that. The matrix, it would be great if they were broken down by substation rather than the city of Elmhurst, because substation will tell us a whole lot more than the city of Elmhurst.
very good, very good. As a 7th Ward Alderman, well done, sir. Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Few things. A, I agree with everything everyone has said. I'm glad we have had this discussion. And I do support hiring our own private engineer to assess and analyze what is exactly that we need, because I certainly don't know on my own. But as long as I do have 6 years regarding what your task is regarding the bill, I do have a list of items that I would like to express to you, basically items that I believe the bill should contain. Number one, not only should it be about reliability, but I think that reliability needs to include reliability on clear weather days, not just general reliability, but also on clear weather days. Accountability and affordability should also go along with that reliability as part of the bill. I want to make sure, however possible, that Elmhurst receives its fair share of that $1.1 billion in upgrades of infrastructure. I think we need a clearer indication of how much money this modernization may actually save us. Numbers have been thrown out, but I don't think it's been made really clear. The formulas for both return on the equity and rate caps should be strengthened, since profits could soar if the interest rates rise. And apart from just a weak provision written into the measure, the sky's actually the limit the way it stands right now. My other question is, I know they talk about how well this smart grid will help people regulate and monitor their usage, but I don't know if there's a piece in there that actually lays out how we're going to educate people on how to actually use this or do this. Are we just going to tell everybody, here's this new system, it's going to help you? Or is there a component that will actually, especially for seniors, show them how the heck this thing works and how it can actually help them save money? It was my understanding that that you have to regulate it yourself, the meter. Is that?
Real quick, I'll recognize Representative Nybo, but I also recognize the committee vice chair. If you'd like to grab the mic, I'd be happy to have you speak. Go ahead.
Any mic.
You can take the mic up to your right up here, or the one at the podium, either, whatever's easier for you. But if you could speak into the mic, that'd be great. This way we can, the folks that are watching can hear you as well, too.
Well, I will tell you, the one thing, as sitting back here, I am very disappointed tonight for a few reasons. First and foremost, we are not educated as a group. We have an electrical engineer on our task force. No one's even talked to him. You're talking about hiring an engineer, doing an engineering study that, to be honest with you, if you ask us, I'm in the electrical industry, he is an electrical engineer, you're not going to benefit anything from it. When you talk about smart grid doesn't need interaction. The few things that it does for you, yes, it regulates, yes, it will move power from one grid to another, but it's not something you're going to have a lot of knowledge to be able to use. It is going to be, when you get smart meter, it's not something you're going to have to know how to do. There's no buttons to push. There's nothing like that. But my disappointment is that this group as a whole does not have enough education to make decisions. You have resources available to you that you're not utilizing, and they're free resources. We volunteered our time, and you're not utilizing our expertise. We have no direction as a group. You've not given us any direction as a group. We have recommendations. You haven't asked us what our recommendations are. It's very disappointing to sit here. We talk about education. What are the projects? You know that with the House bill, within 30 days, they have to be ready to spend $250,000 in projects. They have to have them on the books. Do you think that they don't have them ready to go right now? Do you not think that that all of this is ready to go, and they're shovel ready. So why aren't we asking the question, is Elmhurst part of those projects? I mean, that's something we should know. When you talk about the House bill and you talk about a 20% reduction and a 15% reduction, hey, listen, it doesn't sound like a whole lot to me either. But if you think about it in terms of a 20% reduction on the number of times that happens, and then a 15% reduction in the time that we're down, now we're talking about, instead of 100 minutes, we're talking about 60-something minutes. That's not that bad. Where's that put us? We're talking about we're 25 to 33 from the bottom. Does that then put us in the top? I don't know. I don't know that, but neither does Alderman Wagner that was talking. You don't know that. So to speak and say that's not acceptable, I don't know. It may be really acceptable. To Alderman Healy's point, listen, if that puts us way above where Downage Grove is and where our other neighboring communities are, is that going to make you more comfortable? But just to throw out 20 and 15% isn't good. I don't know. It may be great. So the education, and not just the education within this group, but the education within the city. We talk about burying power lines. Burying power lines, it would be cheaper for everybody to get a generator than to go to burying power lines. Does our community understand that? Do they understand the cost to them personally? When you have senior citizens that cannot afford the $5,000, $10,000 of infrastructure they would have to put in their own house, they'd have to change their meter, they have to pay for some of that work. They don't know that. So without the education, there are conspiracy theories out there everywhere, and we have to educate the community. That's something that we're willing to do, but you guys aren't asking us that. You're not asking us anything. I'm wasting my time. I have more important things to do than to waste my time. If you want my help, I'm here. I'm here all the time. When we meet, this man over here, Frank, who's an electrical engineer that has more knowledge than I'll ever have in this industry, you guys aren't utilizing the resource. We're here to help. Mm-hmm. We're here. It's 10 o'clock at night. I like to be in bed.
Right. No, we appreciate what you're doing, and we apologize about the timing because we've got some legislative issues that are happening, and your report isn't going to be out for a little bit of time. But one thing I promise you we will do, we will have myself and City Manager Grabowski will be in touch with you regarding before we hire any type of an electrical engineer to take a look at things. If we so choose that we feel that we need an outside person, we'll talk to you about that specifically, and we want to hear your input as well too. So your work is not going to be for naught, believe me. So, but I understand your frustration, and timing is a big issue with this as well too.
I understand the timing, but we've been together since February.
Right.
We haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be partially our fault, but I got to tell you, we're getting no direction from you guys. We don't understand what we can do. I asked the ComEd guys the same question I'm asking you. If you can't tell me what I'm doing and what difference I can make, I'm wasting my time.
Right. We understand. Okay. Thank you, sir. And one of the challenges we've had with ComEd over the summer is being that we've been hit by these storms, and they've been hit by storms like hurricanes on the East Coast. It's been challenging to get the folks from ComEd to actually come in and actually meet with the subcommittee. So I apologize on our behalf, but also, again, trying to get them in the room, given what's been going on. And none of this has been, I think, under the radar, literally, given what's happened locally, as well as virtually having to take all their gear and bring it to the East Coast for the hurricane that hit the East Coast as well. So, Alderman Pez, finish up.
Finish up. Thank you. I appreciate your input, and one of my hopes was also for this evening. I think that was a great piece of information that I didn't know and we needed to know, so thank you. Hopefully this will now include everyone in the process, and we can work together and more closely and more efficiently. My last item is I'd like to ask a question. Any of our representatives, they may know the answer, and I think this is important. Once again, I'm only referencing this bill. It was mentioned that Illinois in the bill will be closing 2 coal-fired power plants. Do we know if this bill does not pass, if those will still be closed, or if they will only be closed if this bill passes? Does anyone know that?
The gentleman just
That's
spoke.
something I would like to know.
Go ahead.
Could you get the name?
Yeah, state
You know,
your
can you do us a favor, state your name so we know who
My
you
name
are?
is Jeff Bird. I'm 707 South Washington. The
You're the
answer
vice,
to that
you're the
is
vice chair or the chair of the,
the vice chair of the
there we
task
go.
force.
Perfect, thank you.
The answer to that is because of legislation, the coal burning facilities will either have to be upgraded to a point where they can't afford to upgrade them, or they're going to have to close them.
Thank you.
Alderman Healy, and then I'll go to Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had 3 things to say initially, and I'm going to add a couple more to them. First, in specific response to some of the comments made by Mr. Burke. First, I'm not going to speak to the council's knowledge or lack of knowledge regarding ComEd, Smart Grid, Senate Bill 1652. I can only tell you how much time I've spent on it, and it's more than I care to admit. I think I can do a pretty good job of debating the merits or the flaws of 1652, and I think I can also speak fairly intelligently about Smart Grid. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I'm not going to claim to be a techie, or know the technical terms, but I know enough now to feel confident what I'm saying. For example, one of the other benefits, if you will, for ComEd regarding the Smart Grid is its ability to make it more difficult for suppliers of energy to compete with ComEd. ComEd doesn't talk about that. That's not in any of their flyers, but it does. Side point. Secondly, the 15 to 20% that's been mentioned, 2 points. First, those are ComEd's numbers. Not sure I believe them. Secondly, those are not specific to Elmhurst. Those are everybody. So if the tide raises, it raises all boats. The Elmhurst boat is lower than anybody else. So if everybody goes up 15 to 20, if you believe those numbers at ComEd's face value, we're still at the bottom. So, you know, and I think we have to be careful in meetings like this about making grand statements or making blanket statements, you know, whether it's about the, you know, how much the council does or doesn't know, or, and this was one of my original was going to be one of my original points. Representative Nibel mentioned it, Alderman Brand mentioned it. Nobody that I'm aware of has asked for ComEd to bury our power lines. We know, based on figures that Mayor DeCiani got, that that's roughly $500 million to do. Nobody is asking for that. What we have asked for is a circuit-by-circuit analysis to say, are there feeder lines? Are there, I believe the term is port lines, port connections, port lines, that can be buried to improve that circuit's reliability? So I don't want anybody leaving this, you know, the press or anybody sitting here, or certainly any of our state representatives, walking away from this meeting thinking the Elmhurst City Council or some subsection thereof is asking to bury the power lines. We're not. Likewise, you know, I don't know that there are some that think that going from a 4 kV to a 12 kV system would improve things. Maybe it would. We know based on figures that that's a $35 million ask. We've not made that request as a council. Can it help? Maybe it does. Point being, I think it's very important that we don't set unrealistic expectations and we don't set unrealistic goals to where ComEd looks at us as a bunch of crackpots that don't know what we're talking about. The reason we want to hire a professional engineer, not to suggest anybody in the crowd or in the community doesn't have that experience, is so we can get the specifics on what we need. If the Citizens Task Force has the capability of going circuit by circuit, block by block, to tell us what's wrong with every circuit, I wouldn't be opposed to that. If they can do it fairly quickly, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But that's the kind of information we're looking for. Secondly, in specific regard to the professional engineer, Attorney Storino, maybe Assistant Manager Kopp, Has that process started already? I was under the impression that that process has started already under the manager's discretion.
That's correct. He's looked at some firms. We've only got one proposal back. It was from the firm that did the study for Deerfield.
Okay. So the bottom line is that the process is going. It's not going to start because of what we did tonight. It's already started. Yes. So that we can move a little more quickly. Now, certainly if the committee can help us, great. I mean, I don't want to spend money I don't have to, but I do know when I sit and talk to those gentlemen, the representatives and the senator, or ComEd, I want to know that what we're asking for is going to fix is the wrong word, to help the problem. Lastly, in regards to the meeting, if that's what we decide to do and have a whole body meeting with ComEd, I would suggest that we invite Representatives Nibel and Rebeletti back and Senator Dillard back and perhaps Senator Sandak, who still is, at least represents part of Elmhurst at least for some time, Representative Belloc, who might represent Elmhurst. Let's invite them all. Let's invite them all, and we, you know, they can hear what we hear, they can hear what ComEd says, and let's have that conversation. If it helps reliability, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And just so we're clear, we definitely don't want to lessen the importance of the task force, but just like we have many stormwater experts that work for V3 and many of the other engineering firms that are out there as volunteers that are our residents, we hired an outside consultant, Christopher Burke, to actually do the actual analysis and to make recommendations with the guidance of the task force. So similar to that, would we be looking at doing this if the city manager so chooses? So no disrespect. We know you're a professional and you may have some certifications, but like on the stormwater side, I think we've got about 16 or 17 stormwater engineers that sit on that. I'm sure they would have done that for free as well too. But we want an unbiased opinion that's not our staff, that's not a resident necessarily, but our pros in the field, and with your guidance and we respect your intellect. We'll be looking for feedback across the board in the final report from you as well. So, Alderman Levin, then I'll go Alderman Brown.
Well, I think I am disappointed to hear that the task force has not been involved to this point, because the lack of direction is something that came up months ago, and I assumed that they were more involved. And Mr. Leck, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, has been kind enough to send me email that he has quite a bit of expertise, and not all electrical engineers have worked for ComEd. So it brings not only a technical component that these two gentlemen have, but it also brings an institutional component that I think is quite valuable for us. And I think I understand that, and I can't speak for whether the kind of analysis we're looking for can be done by private citizens in an effective way or not, but I'm certain that it would be helpful to have that kind of input to work with the engineers. It's something that the mayor, the city manager, and the aldermen don't have when they're talking to ComEd. Alderman Healy is someone I trust, and I know that he has taken a lot of time to look into this. I don't feel like I'm educated enough, and now I'm told we have these kind of resources that aren't being brought to bear on what will help us make good decisions to communicate to our elected representatives down in the central part of the state. So I couldn't encourage us enough to have the city manager's office get these people involved and use their talents. I can tell you, as someone that served on a task force, you put a lot of time into it, and you feel good if your work is listened to for what it is. And I don't know if I can apologize to them, but I just want to make sure that that resource is brought up to the table to participate with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Brown.
Alderman Levin actually discussed the topic I wanted to address, and it's a little bit off topic here. I am disappointed to hear that there isn't the appropriate direction to this specific subcommittee. I'm hoping this isn't a trend throughout the whole task force. I hope going forward from this evening on that there's solid direction given to your subcommittee. I know the committee has done a good job in regards to taking notes and communicating the discussions that they have had. I do appreciate the expertise. I hope that that this has not discouraged any of the subcommittee members to discontinue their volunteer effort, because I myself appreciate all the effort and time that you have put in up to date and hopefully going forward. I would also like to encourage that we hear from the subcommittee where they're at today, what the discussions they've had. Maybe not all aldermen have absorbed what they have met and discussed with the ComEd reps or with city staff, but I think it would be beneficial that we actually take the opportunity to glean some of the knowledge that they have internally and they have received from ComEd reps and city staff. So I don't know if I would suggest that that's prior to any discussion with ComEd, or maybe we can do it on an individual basis, but I know I've learned a lot. I am an electrical engineer that have never worked for ComEd, and at this time, I would say I'm very happy that I haven't worked for ComEd. But I do appreciate Frank's efforts as well as the rest of the subcommittee members, and hopefully we can all learn from what they know today and move forward with some clear direction. And I think that the meaning of this whole committee of the whole meeting was to come together as a full city council instead of segmented and make strong recommendations to what we think or what we know is needed within the city of Elmhurst. The next step is how we get to that point, but I think that is very important that we all get together and sit down and hammer that out.
Okay, Alderman Dunn.
There's no doubt that investment is needed, and to improve, ComEd definitely needs capital to do so. How do we prioritize where they're going to put that? I thought Alderman Kennedy framed it pretty well with the long-term versus the short-term view. The smart grid does some good things. It enables the duration of power outages to be shortened. That's a good thing. But I think the bill's overly enamored with the smart grid. I think it needs to be more focused on the infrastructure. The 20% improvement, I just don't think is adequate for our situation. If I had to tell the constituents that instead of your average 5 days a year being out for 10 to 12 hours per time, it's now 4 days a year, 8 hours per time, that's still not going to please them. So I think we need to be a little more aggressive on our goals, and to get there, we need to invest more in the infrastructure.
Okay. Thanks, Alderman. Anybody else? Alderman Pezza.
I would just like to recommend, or whatever we need to do, that, as Alderman Molnar stated earlier, we call another committee of the whole meeting in 2 weeks to continue the discussion, hopefully have more information, and can come to a few more maybe conclusions, consensus, whatever it is, more direction, and obviously hope that the task force and some others would be present also.
Very good, very good. Okay. And I would say in the short term, aldermen that have bullet points that you can get to me and get to Representative Nybo and Rebeletti and Senator Dillard, all of our legislators, try to get those bullets to them ASAP, because I think this trailer bill is being put together as we speak. So subcommittee members, if you have recommendations that you'd like to get to the mayor's manager's office, because your report's going to be coming out a couple months down the road, but if you have any specific recommendations that you think may be pertinent for the legislation as well, if you'd be willing to get those to us as soon as possible, that would be great as well too, prior to the report, because again, by the time the report comes out, this legislation will be sailed or sunk, depending on what happens with this. So in the meantime, Alderman Pezza, are you looking for a resolution maybe at the next meeting? I know you were talking about trying to do something like that. Do you have any, and then we'll let City Manager Grabowski give him the guidance to do what he feels right. And I believe we'll definitely have the city manager speak with the chair of the ComEd subcommittee as well to give him some guidance as well, too. So you guys feel
Absolutely.
okay? But if you want to speak to the resolution, possibly.
Absolutely. I do have a copy of what Oak Brook has already put together. I would like to see ours more detailed, more aggressive, but it's something to go off of. I'm not sure who has this, if everyone has it, but I would just ask our representatives if you believe there should be a date certain by which we should present something like this. What would you recommend? Obviously sooner rather than later, but, so this would have to be in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, Alderman Pezza, just a suggestion, maybe, why don't we do a meeting of a whole next week to expedite this a little more? I think we can get it together. And if we don't have it all together, we'll have the following week too, but that way we'll definitely make our October date.
Very good. Chairman Morley.
As a follow-up to that, since timing is of the essence, whether it's Alderman Pezza or the mayor or a combination thereof, we should have a draft of a resolution, what we're looking for, by next week. And so we have some firm direction to be able to put that resolution as a committee to the council the following week. That's 2 weeks. Anything beyond that is really not going to hit our timing.
Can I suggest that draft being with the city manager, so we can all view it and don't have to discuss it?
Well, I assume city staff would prepare it, and we'd get it in our packet for our next meeting.
If it's a work in progress, that we can all talk to the city manager or assistant city manager.
Absolutely. I don't see an issue with that, Chairman. Alderman Brown.
My recommendation would be that we have a draft resolution for this upcoming packet, which therefore we will all review at a committee of the whole meeting next Monday, 1 week from tonight. We can make any modifications, have any discussions of what we would like to see added or subtracted, and therefore move forward 2 weeks from this evening.
A second.
Thank you for the clarification. We had a second over here from Chairman Hipskin. Alderman Levin.
Is it possible to have some input from our task force at that committee of the whole meeting? We've invited our legislators, and if we could see if they don't have anything they want to tell us at that point, but if they do, that would be a good time to hear anything that's ready, because it will be information that will be used.
Definitely. We will, at the next committee of the whole, we'll definitely let the subcommittee interact as we did today and give us their feedback as well, too. Okay? Chairman Morley?
Is there a motion pending?
We have a motion and a second to prepare the resolution and actually have a committee of the whole meeting. So we can do that by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say no. That motion is passed, and we will move forward accordingly. So, all right. Very good discussion. Appreciate the debate. We appreciate our fine members of the Illinois State Legislature for coming out. Senator Dillard, Representative Nybo, Representative Rebeletti, thank you for your concern and convictions. And at this time, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Alderman Mulliner, with a second by Alderman Morley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Then me.